Honorable Senators, when the business of the Senate was suspended for lunch, we were at the second reading of bills. The Honorable Senator Barry Griffin was about to commence his presentation on the Public Procurement Bill and the Public Finance Management Bill. As many?
Madam President, I thank you for your indulgence in this place in allowing me to speak to both bills that are currently laid before us today, the Public Finance Management Bill and the Public Procurement Bill. Greetings to all of those who are here and were here with us today in the gallery, and greetings to all those watching live on TV right now, or those who will be watching or listening after the fact online or the parliamentary channel. Madam President, before I begin, I would like to thank our Prime Minister for his continued support of me and confidence in me to sit in this place to represent the Bahamian people, and his support of the entire team of government senators who are doing a great job in representing the Bahamian people, not just in this place, but on various matters of national import across the government. You want to thank the Prime Minister? Last week, as you've indicated in your communication, Madam President, I was asked to represent the Bahamas at the 146th Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union in Manama, Bahrain, alongside Minister Pia Glover-Roll, yourself, and Senator Aricia Hepburn Forbes. Madam President, you know all too well my political philosophy. As a small nation, for our survival and for our continued prosperity, we must engage with the world. We must make friends and build relationships to ensure that we have a seat at the table when issues that are important to us are discussed. To that end, I was pleased to be part of this international outreach. The overarching theme of the Assembly was promoting peaceful coexistence and inclusive societies. Session topics throughout the Assembly included sustainable development goals with an emphasis on gender equality goals and legislation, youth involvement in parliament and policy, cyber attacks and cyber crimes, global security risk, and United Nations affairs. The Bahamas' delegation's attendance at the IPU Assembly was multifold, Madam President, with the predominant focus being an analysis of the benefit of the Bahamas becoming an IPU affiliate, and thereby the 180th member nation to join. High-level meetings were held with IPU Secretary General Martin Chungong in that regard. These meetings are a follow-up to an initial affiliation meeting held in Halifax, Canada in August 2022 during the 65th Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Conference. The Bahamas delegation for those initial discussions was led by Minister Pia Glover-Roll, with myself in support, and accompanied by Opposition Senator Reuben Raming and Assistant House Clerk Rashad Flowers. It is the considered view, Madam President, of the Bahamas delegation that the Inter-Parliamentary Union affiliation should be sought by the Bahamas to access the many benefits that membership provides. Minister Pia Glover-Roll will advance a paper to Cabinet seeking consideration of the same, and the opposition leader has advised of the opposition's agreement in support of IPU affiliation. Madam President, I would also like to join you in expressing my sincere condolences to the family of the late Ed Bethel, who I affectionately call HC. I'm happy that during the lunch break from this place, I was able to sign the book of condolences along with yourself for Mr. Bethel. I was deeply sad to learn about his passing. I met Mr. Bethel when I was a law student studying in the United Kingdom. I had been there for a few years when he was appointed as the Bahamas High Commissioner. He quickly made himself known to the Bahamian diaspora living in the UK and to the many Bahamian students studying in the UK. He opened the doors to the High Commission to Bahamians, truly making it Bahamas House. He was warm, friendly, and was a great source of Bahamian history. On a personal level, Madam President, he was always extremely welcoming to me and supportive of me. He ensured that I was part of everything that took place at the High Commission, often inviting me to events and to bring remarks on behalf of the Bahamian students living in the UK. Years later, when we both had returned to the Bahamas, he expressed his support for my venture into politics and was always a source of wisdom and encouragement. I will remember the many years of friendship, camaraderie, and support shared between us. So rest in peace, HC. This is truly a loss for your family and for the whole Bahamas. Madam President, in a few short months, this government will present its second budget to the Bahamian people. So this is an opportune time ahead of that to talk a little bit about the ongoing efforts of this government to strengthen public financial management. Because if done right, good public financial management has the power to increase trust in government, ensure the sustainability of public finance, and reinforce wider societal shifts toward inclusion and growth. It's a known fact, Madam President, that governments that are efficient and accountable are better at delivering services, better at protecting the poor, and better at creating an environment that supports private sector growth and job creation. Studies by the World Bank have shown that more than half of the global population expresses distrust in government institutions, in huge part because public resources are not always spent well. Addressing the challenges of the public financial system is a central part to this administration's reform agenda and as part of a broader effort to ensure transparency and sustainability of public finances. In our blueprint for change, we said that we would strengthen the economy through fiscal responsibility. Specifically, on page 20, we said we would stop financial leakage in our public sector and through fiscal consolidation and modernization of infrastructure, deliver public goods and services in an efficient, transparent, and accountable manner. Madam President, these bills before the Senate today are part of us meeting that promise to the Bahamian people. Madam President, public financial management is complex. To give you a somewhat textbookish but comprehensive definition, it is a set of laws, rules, systems, and processes used for mobilizing revenue, allocating public funds, undertaking public spending, and accounting and auditing. Strong public financial management, PFM, systems are essential to improve public service delivery, speed up poverty reduction, and to achieve sustainable development goals. By way of a little background, the groundswell of public support for reforming PFM systems around the world originally came in the 1980s in OECD countries. Public financial management was then introduced initially in response to widespread criticism of the public service linked to the fast expansion of government spending. The last couple of decades globally have shown that public financial management reforms are not always easy and have been met with limited success in many cases. And this finding holds true regardless of whether PFM reforms are tried in low, middle, or upper income countries. Past experience has shown that there is no cookie-cutter approach and that reforms have to be tailored to local circumstances. Global experience also shows that PFM reforms take time. New Zealand, for example, adopted a big bang approach, but most countries with PFM reforms were comparatively gradual and steady. This is also because PFM reforms are complex and need broad-based consensus. To be successful, they involve introducing or implementing enabling legislation, building government capacity, efficient processes, and deploying appropriate systems. So, Madam President, it's quite baffling that the previous administration hastily passed the existing legislation, perhaps in an attempt to appear reform-minded, but did nothing to successfully implement the legislation. In fact, Madam President, it's been a running bad joke at how inapplicable many of the provisions of the existing legislation are to the Bahamian context. It's as if they lifted the text, copy and paste from another jurisdiction with no thought at all as to how it would play out given the very unique circumstances here in the Bahamas. They seem to take joy in saying that this administration isn't following the timelines in the legislation, not understanding themselves that the timelines simply did not fit our particular context as a jurisdiction. But c'est la vie, Madam President. At this point, we're used to correcting their wrongs. We're used to being Mr. Fix-It. So since September 2021, we have been on the job with our hammer and nail fixing the problems that they have left behind. So what the world realized decades ago, Madam President, we hope the now opposition has come to the same realization, that large-scale reforms may not always work. Pragmatic, targeted reforms, and quite simply a better sequencing of reforms lead to more success. Madam President, My most able colleagues have already delved into the details of the clauses of the bill, so I shan't take your time in doing that. Rather, I will highlight to the Bahamian people the procurement bill, its aims and objectives, its importance given the current national and international context, and the outlook moving forward. This government is in the midst of ushering a new era of economic prosperity. After many sluggish years under the last administration, the economy is back on track. We have record-breaking numbers in tourism. Through our fiscal reform, the collection of VAT is up and the deficit is down. This is an excellent opportunity to reform the public procurement system in particular, a simpler system where our government and people can get more value for money. So what are our key objectives and aims of this new legislation, Madam President? One, to comply with international agreements. Procurement is a key part of trade and technical cooperation agreements. Ensuring ongoing compliance ensures that Bahamian producers of goods and services continue to have access to international markets. So in this bill, we are sure to comply with the principles of non-discrimination, transparency, open and fair competition. Within these confines, however, we have the scope to design a more streamlined system than the one that we are currently operating under. We wanted to make the procedures much more flexible and much more commercial so that government agencies can better design their procurement to better fit with what they are buying. This bill aims to make procurement more transparent. Much more information will be published throughout the cycle, information upfront about what the government is going to buy, information at the end about what was bought and what was done with it. Madam President, this bill ensures that contracts below a certain threshold are limited to national bidders unless approval is sought to open the proposed procurement opportunity to international bidders. And I applaud the drafters of this bill for expanding and strengthening the exclusion grounds in this bill. By exclusion grounds, I mean the instances in which a company may be suspended or completely barred from bidding on government contracts. We've all seen shoddy work done by government contractors or questioned the integrity of a particular supplier of goods. This bill strengthens the grounds on which the government can exclude those companies from getting government contracts. Companies may be excluded if they have committed offenses such as fraud or bribery, or if there have been performance issues by them in the past. My suggestion to the Minister, however, for a future amendment is for the Act to create a debarment register, which would be accessible to all public sector organizations, which would list all companies that should be excluded from government contracts. Madam President, importantly and excitingly for me, a preference was added to the bill for MSMEs, women-owned businesses, family island businesses, and youth-owned businesses. Someone once told me that with each new administration begins a new economic cycle. And this is what they meant, Madam President. The PLP is literally changing laws so that more Bahamians and Bahamians who have traditionally been sidelined in our economy now have a fighting chance at getting a piece of the pie. Lastly, Madam President, I want to highlight that the new bill introduces new principles of procurement to be followed by procuring entities and public bodies. These principles include accountability, value for money, fair dealing, integrity, and transparency. Madam President, I don't think many people realize just how important this piece of legislation is, just how important it is to open up the government's purse to micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, Madam President. Bahamians often lament that the rich get richer, and the same families who were the recipients of the government's largesse in 1953 and 1983 are the same families in 2023. Well, this is how we begin to break up that monopoly, Madam President. No longer will the largest companies be the only ones able to monopolize government contracts. Year after year, the government is the biggest spender in our economy. This Davis administration is using public procurement as an engine for economic growth, diversification, and inclusion. No longer will the government's money, your money, go into the pockets of the most wealthy and most politically connected. It's time for you to get a piece of the pie. So to the women watching, to the young people watching, to the owners of small businesses, this is no small feat. We have opened the doors for you. Now it's time for you to take advantage of what we are doing. Register to provide your goods and services to the government. Apply for government contracts. The decks are no longer stacked against you. This is what you voted us in for. We are literally changing laws and rewriting the script. The ball is now in your court. Madam President, I put my name down to speak in this debate because it also struck me that procurement is so tied to what our biggest economic problem is right now, and that is the cost of living and the rate of inflation. I truly believe that we can use this piece of legislation and the regulatory regime it creates to help combat inflation. This regime will allow us to know more about the rate of inflation and how the transparency and openness created by this new regime will allow for the procurement system to bring down the price the government pays at all levels for the contracts they award. Madam President, I would also like to draw something to the Minister's attention, being the situation in Ukraine. No, not the one that occupies the headlines, but a little noticed development in Ukraine in 2016 that was supported by Transparency International. I speak of the development of its procurement system known as ProZorro. It's a quite remarkable platform that's been lauded the world around. It's open source and it shows every opportunity that exists in Ukraine to bid on contracts. It's completely open to citizens and civil society to look at all of the data on what is being tendered for and what price companies are successfully in bidding for the contracts. It is an extraordinary example of how public procurement can be transformed by openness and technology. And so, to the Minister, this is an example of how public procurement has transformed government spending in another country. And so our cabinet and our minister should be applauded for the fact that we are moving in this direction to be more open and more transparent. Madam President, a big priority that the bill helps to support is innovation. And as I stated before, the openness and transparency of the procurement system will give small businesses much more of an opportunity to see what there is in the pipeline of public procurement. This, again, Madam President, is no small feat. I think we have all been asked by small businesses how they can become part of the procurement pipeline. How can they go through the red tape of applying for government contracts? This bill solves that problem. It makes it more streamlined and easy for innovative and more nimble small businesses to get a part of the economic pie. Madam President, in closing, let me highlight 3 ingredients that we see in successful public financial management reforms around the world. First is the leadership and commitment at both the political and technical level. Second are the reforms that take on broad-based international good practices but make sure they are appropriate to the country's own unique context. And third, there is a reform process that is adaptive, iterative, and inclusive, that monitors, learns, and makes adjustments as needed. Madam President, it is clear for all to see that under this administration, the Bahamas has the ingredients to make our reform successful. A Prime Minister and a Cabinet who are truly reform-minded, not just doing it for show, a team that doesn't just talk the talk, but they put in the work and walk the walk. 2, reforms that follow international best practices, but aren't copy and paste from some foreign jurisdiction. Legislation and regulatory framework that are tailored to the Bahamas. And 3, a government that doesn't claim to know it all. Rather, a government that is ready to listen, learn, and adapt at every step of the way. And to quote former Prime Minister Perry Christie, Madam President, so said, so done. In our blueprint for change, we promise reform to our public financial system. We promise to clean up the disastrous legislation left behind from the last administration, and we promise to support women, young people, micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. And so said, so done. With that, Madam President, I support these bills and I take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator Barry Griffin. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
Thank you, Madam President. Consistent with my fellow senators today, I do want to welcome you back. You did leave us in good hands, I must say. I like him in that chair, Madam President.
You don't like him in this chair.
Madam President, I rise to contribute on the public procurement and public finance management bills. And I'd like to take this opportunity to pause and to recognize the Organization for Responsible Governance, Bahamas. You know, it continues to review and make recommendations to these pieces of legislation. And I think that just as with other stakeholders, we ought to consider what it is they say, what it is they put forward from time to time in terms of public feedback. Madam President, my esteemed colleague has done an excellent job thoroughly assessing these legislation that are before us today. And so I don't need to go into much detail. I just have a few remarks that I would like to make. For me, it is particularly disturbing that in the Public Finance Management Bill 2023, that, as has been mentioned, the Auditor General's power is limited in the way that it is. You know, Madam President, it's amazing how, but they say, you only know me when you need me. When it's convenient, you know, administrations like the New Day one, or they love the Auditor General and like to quote him and, you know, and really leverage what it is he says. But it seems like, you know, even though they want to fully endorse the Auditor General, when it's convenient, we want to circumvent the power that that office holds in this particular piece of legislation with regard to public finance management, Madam President. And that's very, very unfortunate in my mind. Madam President, just
a point of order. And not to cut off my
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam President.
Can you please wait to be recognized by the chair, Mr.
Yes.
Vice President?
I apologize, Madam President.
I thank you so much for following the rules of the Senate, Mr. Vice President.
I didn't want to stop my colleague in her stride. However, I would like to point out the inaccuracy of her statement. Her thoughts on the Auditor General was something shared by ORG, the transparency organization here in the Bahamas, and their concerns were relayed to the Auditor General, and he, in a response to them, noted that the points in the bill, Section 10 in particular, Clauses 2 and 5, which specify limitations in the scope of the Auditor General, his opinion is that Section 10, Clause 2 and 5 of the bill does not limit the capacity of the Auditor General in accordance with international standards. So I just wanted to put that on a note. That was in a note sent by ORG. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Barry Griffin.
Madam President, just 2 days ago on March the 21st day, we celebrated World Down Syndrome Day, at which time persons wore socks, colorful, bright socks, as a conversation starter, really to raise awareness for Down syndrome. And Madam President, I don't know who else, but I know for sure that our good senator here, Senator Barnett Ellis, did participate. I saw her socks. And of course, I had my socks as well, but I didn't public, you had your socks? They were mismatched and brightly colored. So, Madam President, so the socks, you know, they're to really get the conversation started on Down syndrome. And in addition to the fact that they're bright and colorful, they get the conversation started, it's like socks themselves, Madam President, chromosomes are said to be shaped like socks. And so, you know, these bright color socks just raise awareness for Down syndrome on World Down Syndrome Day, because persons with Down syndrome have an extra chromosome. And Madam President, Down syndrome is just one of many disabilities that persons live with, here in our country and around the world. And so this year's theme for World Down Syndrome Day was with us, not for us. And it promotes a human rights-based approach to persons with disabilities and to disabilities. And the reality is that even though we may not realize it, many persons with disabilities are capable of leading an independent and, really involved life in our society, but they need our support in order to make it happen. And so what persons with disabilities have constantly tried to move away from is the charity model when it comes to disability. They need a hand out, and, we need to give them something and feel sorry for them and be pitiful and just give to them. That's not what they want. They don't want to be objectified. They're humans just like all of us, and they deserve equal and equitable rights, Madam President, as citizens in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. They deserve to be treated fairly and to be extended opportunities to work alongside us to improve their own lives. And so, Madam President, unfortunately, this is another missed opportunity, another exclusive bill that doesn't include, like it could have, persons with disabilities. In Section 3 of the Public Procurement Bill, Madam President, we could have included businesses owned by persons with disabilities. When it comes to development preferences, this group of potential vendors need it most, Madam President. And even though there are limited local opportunities when it comes to academics and activities for persons at a certain age when they have disabilities, certainly when they get beyond that, they need to get involved in meaningful work. They need to be able to start their own businesses and to be able to function. And the Public Procurement Bill in Section 43 certainly could have given consideration to that. Because the reality is, Madam President, in general, life is challenging in general. And when you have a disability, it adds to that challenge. And locally, we really allocate insufficient sums to persons with disabilities and to advancing their causes. And unfortunately, these same persons and the organizations who support them are not able to properly access international funding because of the lack of local empirical data. And I have to say that the census is another missed opportunity to be inclusive when it comes to persons with disabilities, Madam President. And we cannot wait another 10 years in order to properly understand the needs of persons with disabilities living in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And the census obviously covers islands that ordinarily we may not reach on a limited budget. Let's just say an NGO tries to take it on. And so to truly take an archipelagic approach to persons with disabilities in our community, the census would have been a good opportunity to do that. And Madam President, I can't say where we got our questions from, but I know often we seek to leverage, best practices from other places in the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm looking at benchmarking and looking at other countries, but we have to be mindful that, let's say they gave us their questions for their census. They may have other things that they do in order to capture persons with disabilities and other health challenges. They may have national health surveys or other instruments that we don't execute here. And so we have to be mindful of what our local situation is and what our needs are, and definitely the census should have included them. And if they had been included, these are ways to really kind of understand what percentage of our population they represent. And then perhaps when we're drafting legislation like the Public Procurement Bill, and we realize that X% of persons, have disabilities, then we may be more likely to include them as having development preference in Section 43. And so, Madam President, this is very, very, very important. And I've said it before, none of us is exempt. Being a person with disability isn't something that is for some and not for others. We're all, regrettably, and hopefully not, but one incident or one illness away from being a person with disability. Everyone isn't born with disabilities. And in fact, that's another thing we could have captured in our census. If you do have a disability, were you born with it or did you get it over time? And so they're missing from this piece of legislation, and they're missing. They're nameless, they're faceless, and that's the way many of them feel in our society. And I've heard from parents of persons with disabilities and persons with disabilities, and they really just don't feel as if proper attention, proper priority is given to them and to their needs. And we really ought to fix that. And like I said, the public procurement bill is another missed opportunity because procurement, in my mind, Madam President, is a perfect chance to be disability inclusive and to get in law for them, you know, the opportunities they need to really have like equality and equity and just general inclusion as Bahamian citizens. And so, Madam President, you know, that's very unfortunate for me. And so, Madam President, you know, the same way our good colleague, Minister here, crunches the numbers and manages to find funds to be expended on travel and parties and consultants, is the same way that I hope that he would use his immense financial skills to perhaps run a national survey, you know, on disability or to really find monies to support this community more. And, you know, I'm sure we've heard it. I know I've heard it personally, the whole image of the Senate as a rubber stamp. And that reputation we need to get away from, but it's difficult in this kind of democracy. So I have to say that while these bills have many defects, and Senator Barnett Ellis has done a great job of speaking to them, if I could personally change just one thing, I would send it back down to that other chamber just so that they could be more inclusive when it comes to businesses owned by persons with disabilities appearing in Section 43. That's what I would have done, Madam President. But regrettably, the opposition will have its say, but the government will have its way. And its way in this instance is to exclude persons with disabilities when it comes to development preference in public procurement. As such, Madam President, I cannot support the public procurement and public finance management bills. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator Maxine Seymour. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kirkland Russell.
Good afternoon, Madam President. Welcome back. Good afternoon, colleagues. Once again, let me begin by thanking Almighty God for all His bountiful blessings, including the strength to stand in this honored place once again and speak on behalf of the people of this great country. I wish to thank our distinguished Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Honorable Philip Edward Davis, for his continual confidence in me, his support, and words of encouragement. Madam President, with your leave, I wish to also extend condolences to the family of the late Eldred Ed Bethel. Mr. Bethel was a great Bahamian who helped to shape the modern Bahamas, especially his contribution to broadcasting, which spanned it for decades, stretching back to pre-independence. As a matter of fact, it was his voice that we heard all around the Bahamas on that blessed night. He later became highly regarded as a class act diplomat, along with his wife, serving the Bahamas with distinction. I wish to also extend heartfelt condolences to my cousins, Cleon and Kaylee Newton, on the passing of their dear mother, Joanne Russell Newton. Miss Newton herself was a strong businesswoman and a soldier for the Catholic Church and the people of Grand Bahama. May her soul and the souls of all the faithfully departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I want to talk mostly today on the Public Procurement Act. As stated earlier, this act is designed to promote fair and equitable treatment of all suppliers, consultants, service providers, and contractors in public procurement. Additionally, it will promote and expand competition across our archipelago. It will promote transparency, promote accountability, and promote sustainability as well as integrity. This 2022 Public Procurement Bill will repeal and replace the 2021 Public Procurement Act. Prime Minister in the other place called the 2021 Public Procurement Act a strange act, saying that in context of the Bahamas, it ignores the structural imbalance in the economy, an imbalance which, he said, his government is obliged to correct. He went on to give this example, saying, in the procurement of food, one vendor, by virtue of its size and corporate relations, monopolized government procurement contracts. A literal regarding of the current Procurement Act would indicate that there is nothing wrong with this domination. But common sense, he said, would dictate that the government of the Bahamas should be providing opportunities for the greater Bahamian populace, end quote. Simply put, this administration stands on the principle that all Bahamians are equal and as many as humanly possible must share in the financial opportunities coming from the government. Madam President, this bill we are debating today seeks to do just that. The Public Procurement Bill 2022 creates provision for preferential treatment for small and worker-owned businesses. It allows the minister responsible for procurement to appoint the procurement board, whereas the previous act required that the board be appointed by the Prime Minister. I guess that provision was in keeping with a competent authority-led administration, which allowed for the maximum concentration of power to be endowed on one individual. Madam President, this administration took the necessary steps to develop and implement a real procurement improvement plan, and once again, focusing on the Bahamian human capital. In putting the improvement plan together, the government have approved a career path for procurement officers, ensuring that they are treated no less fairly than their technical colleagues in the Ministry of Finance. Madam President, the government have also acquired the Go Bonfire platform, a best-in-class procurement platform that is being implemented in the public sector as well as the Public Hospital Authority. This platform is intended to open the doors that lead to economic opportunities for all and sundry. Since the launch of the platform in November of 2022, it has recorded 1,490 vendor registration, 299 posted opportunities, and savings are already estimated at $2.6 million from the use of the platform. A win-win system for all. Madam President, I am always concerned about ordinary Bahamians. Therefore, allow me to highlight a notable change that was made within Part 3, subsection B of the bill, which reads as follows. Contracts below a certain threshold are limited to national bidders unless approval is sought to open that proposed procurement opportunity to international bidders. My understanding of the subsection is that the government did what was necessary within this section to explicitly protect the interests of ordinary Bahamians. Madam President, who can vote against that? Madam President, I wish to draw attention to Clause 43 of the bill, which seeks to introduce development preferences for micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, and in particular, preferences for women-owned businesses, preferences for family island businesses, preferences for youth-owned businesses. Under Clause 43, the percentage of the margin of the preferences as prescribed by the bidding documents and may be applied to such businesses. What that means is that the government will predetermine a percentage of the procurement for those groups, women, youths, and family islanders, basically giving them a head start in the race, giving them some percentage privilege that allows them to negotiate with a little more flexibility, thus improving their chances of being awarded contracts against, at times, bigger fishes. Madam President, isn't it ironic that during this 60th anniversary year celebrating women's rights to vote, and amid this our golden jubilee year of independence, that this progressive Liberal Party-led government brings to the table this progressive piece of legislation aimed at making the bidding process for contracts, goods, and services easier, corruption-free, more fair, and more accessible to women, youths, and family islanders, and increase accountability. Madam President, many of our people in these preference categories were marginalized, disadvantaged, and even omitted, whether knowingly or unknowingly, from the process in prior years. This piece of legislation fixes that and moves our country closer in compliance with several of the conventions we have signed onto in the past. Who, Madam President, will vote against that? Madam President, on the point of equality for women, children, and those living with disabilities, I wish to congratulate the Minister of Social Services and Urban Development, who with several members of his team, as well as other participants, represented the Bahamas with distinction at the 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women at the UN. Under the theme, Innovation and Technological Change and Education in the Digital Age for Achieving Gender Equality and the Empowerment of All Women. Madam President, the bill we are debating today clearly demonstrates that our government is hitting the bull's eye when addressing matters confronting our nation as well as internationally. The theme opined at the UN, Intervention and Technological Change and Education in the Digital Age for Achieving Gender Equality and Empowerment of All Women, is exactly what this bill sets out to accomplish for Bahamian women. Who, Madam President, will vote against that? Madam President, continuing the focus just a little more on development preferences, let us look at the positive impact on family island businesses. We must all admit that there has always been unfortunate hurdles and challenges faced by contractors and business operators across the family of islands regarding equal opportunities. Madam President, for as long as I can remember, family islanders, including those in Grand Bahama, have far too often been overlooked and have experienced noticeable disconnect from the central government as it relates to procurement and contracts for services that they can provide. I'm even talking about contracts that may be considered as small jobs by the big boys in this town, while those on many of our family islands rely on those same opportunities to stimulate the island's economy, give hope to the youth, and stabilize unemployment. And as it relates to major projects, family island contractors are for the most part unaware of contract prospect that has been put out for tender, sometimes not knowing about the opportunity until they see work being done, and sometimes the contract opportunities are posted on the administrator's notice board, but during the week that the deadline occurs, not giving interested local bidders the time to organize themselves and submit proper bids for serious consideration. Madam President, this compassionate government is fixing that age-old problem. As stated earlier, the government have acquired the Go Bonfire platform. The procurement platform is simple to navigate, and anyone with a proper device can access all the opportunities available and can effortlessly manipulate the system to satisfy his or her interests. The user can either choose to establish a Pacific island as choice, or he or she may simply choose to access all the opportunities available throughout the Commonwealth. Madam President, this is indeed a new day, and the Bahamian people should know that the beauty of this platform is that whatever island you reside on, bidders, contractors, service provider, all access the same system. They will all be armed with the same information and all afforded the same economic opportunities from the central government. Who can vote against that? Madam President, finally, women, youths, and family islanders have a fair and level playing field to participate in the procurement process within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Again, I ask, who can vote against that? Madam President, I think right here is a perfect time for me to encourage all women, all youths, and all family island contractors and service providers, especially my people in Grand Bahama, man, to go and sign up on the Go Bonfire platform. Ensure that your business license, Inland Revenue Tax Compliance Certificate, NIB Compliance Certificate are all current. Then you are ready to begin to search the platform for available opportunities. And Madam President, the system is so user-friendly that once you sign up, the system automatically sends you emails to update you whenever opportunity in your selected sectors are posted. Again, Madam President, improving accountability, transparency, mitigating corruption, while earnestly providing economic opportunities for every citizen across the archipelago. Madam President, if you carefully examine our blueprint for change, or even play back the speech from the throne, you will find succinctly outlined these commitments by this government. Madam President, this bill comes at an opportune time, when the government is aggressively seeking to improve infrastructure, such as building and improving clinics and hospitals, building new airports and roads, new hotels, and the housing project for Bahamian is aggressively moving forward. All of this among many other projects that are in the pipeline. Madam President, this is truly going to be an exciting time for family islands, and it is precisely what the Prime Minister is advancing for family island growth and development and for our nation. In closing, Madam President, let me say that the last time we were here, there was a great deal of talk from the other side regarding the foreign travel of our Prime Minister and the various teams of technocrats and other professionals who join him to represent this country from time to time. And I think it is important that those of us on this side consistently highlight some of the outcomes, such as, one, our Prime Minister met with the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, during the COP 2027. And that is a big deal for us when you consider the fact that all world leaders are usually trying to meet with her, and she chose to meet with Prime Minister Davis to discuss possibility within our Bahamas. Number two, carbon credits were established as a new asset class that would allow the Bahamas to finance adaptation to climate shocks, thus allowing us to create a more resilient Bahamas. Thirdly, the first ever long-term concessional financing capacity was established within the IMF to support countries like the Bahamas, which are vulnerable to climate shocks. After Prime Minister would have sensitized the world on climate change at COP27, the world now marks the first time that vulnerability to climate shocks was established as a criteria for concessions. And today, not only the Bahamas, but countries from around the world will benefit. The Prime Minister followed up on local intervention by meeting with U.S. President Kamala Harris. The parties discussed strengthening partnership to combat illegal maritime and migration and reducing the flow of illegal guns into the Bahamas. Prime Minister Davis also raised the important matter of reinstating U.S. preclearance facilities on Grand Bahama, thereby supporting the island's economic recovery. The Prime Minister would have also discussed food security issues, and combating climate change. Number 6, diplomatic relations were signed and an MOU was signed with Saudi Arabia for cooperation on tourism and investment opportunities. Number 7, agreements were also made to develop a tourism development fund and a tourism development cooperation. That is what is called a world-class leader making a difference on the global stage. Madam President, Prime Minister Davis' firm posture on these issues are not simply impacting the Bahamas positively, but the world. Yesterday we celebrated what would have been the 93rd birthday of the father of the nation, Sir Lyndon Oscar Pinley, a man I will not soon forget. You may recall that the 1985 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, CHOGM, was the 8th meeting of the Commonwealth of Nations, and it was held in Nassau, 16 October to the 22nd of October, 1985, and was hosted by the country's Prime Minister, Sir Lyndon Pinley. Out of that meeting came the Nassau Accord, calling on the government of South Africa to dismantle its apartheid policy, enter into negotiations with the country's black majority, and end its occupation of Namibia. Sir Lyndon negotiated with every ounce of energy and wisdom he had to liberate the South Africans and free Nelson Mandela. Once released from prison, Nelson Mandela visited the Bahamas and thanked Sir Lyndon for his role in taking down apartheid. Thabo Mbeki also visited the Bahamas when he became president of South Africa. The point I'm making, and I want to stick, is that on this side, we have always governed for the Bahamian people from a position of strength. And because of who we are as an organization, our proud history, our leadership qualities, our word, our influence, it has impacted positive change throughout our region and indeed the world whenever we govern this country. Madam President, I wish to advise those who are not in agreement with the way we run our country. You may have a different approach in governing. You may not wish to travel. Or when you do travel, you may use those opportunities to lambaste our governments and our people as corrupt. You may wish to use those opportunities to suggest that bananas in Haiti are better than the bananas at Bamsey. That's what you choose to do. But what we choose to do in governing this country and how we run the country allow us to do that. The Bahamian people made the decision about 17 months ago that the way the country was being run was not acceptable. And I believe the Bahamian people are quite happy now. And so, Madam President, with that, I wholeheartedly support these bills. May God continue to bless the efforts of this administration, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Kirkland Russell, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield.
Madam President, I thank you. I appreciate the exuberance of my friend from Grand Bahama, but I don't know which country he lives in. Say the Bahamian people are better off and they're happy. You better don't let them Grand Bahamians hear you with that. Because I can tell you those from Grand Bahama that I speak to, they have not said to me that they're better off, nor have they said to me that they're happy. They say to me often that this new day seems like a new nightmare that they wish to see pass in a hurry. In fact, many Bahamians, when they wake up, they throw salt in the fire. Throw salt in the fire that this dream don't come true. I taught you from the island, man. You're supposed to know these things, right? Throw salt in the fire. I heard someone say that in here today that this government is making so many laws to better the lives of people. I wanted to stand up and say, but I didn't want to interrupt him. All this government doing is breaking laws. Breaking laws. Go into the public treasury and take money and travel on a political trip. That's breaking the law, man. You can do what you feel like. Don't really matter to me. Ignored the laws that we come here to change today for 18 months. That's breaking laws. That's what happened. But before I get into that, Madam President, permit me, it's good to have you back, too. It's really good to have you back. The person who occupied your office in your absence, he did a credible job. Did a very credible job, but he's not you. And so we're very pleased to see you back in your assigned space. I want to begin by expressing condolences to the family of His Excellency Ed Bethel. And Senator Russell, you're quite right. For those of us who grew up under the sound of his voice in that era, sometimes you could not be before a television screen because they were not so prevalent. but he painted a picture for you. We're dating ourselves, right? He painted a picture for you as if you were there, right on the spot and listening to and watching live what he was doing. He and Charles Carter had the ability to do that, both of them deceased. On the weekend, we also celebrated the birthday of Sir Cecil Wallace Whitfield, who I heard in the other place yesterday, I knew this, was chairman of the PLP the first time that party came to power. You all had two great chairmen from the FNM, Sir Cecil and the Right Honorable Hubert Alexander Ingram. Very great, very great. Yes, yes, you produce some good leaders for us. You produce some good leaders for us, and it is upon their shoulders that we stand. We also want to acknowledge yesterday the birthday of Sir Lyndon, another iconic, a great Bahamian, fondly referred to as the father of this wonderful nation. And I keep saying to you younger ones, if you forgive that, that's not meant to be a slight. You're younger than I am. If you had not had the opportunity to read Sir Lyndon's memoirs by Michael Creighton, please do so. They are very instructive. You know, we are here debating a bill that, well, two bills, compendium of bills. Madam President, we've come to debate this Public Finance Management Bill 2023, which will repeal and replace the Public Finance Management Act 2021, repeal Fiscal Responsibility Act 2018, and sections of the Financial Administration Audit Act 2018 and the Public Procurement Bill 2023. It's on days like these when I wonder if the Bahamas is a real place. When the last administration rolled out the legislation we will amend, and in some instances repeal today, was received with, when we rolled out this legislation, it was received with tremendous aplomb and support. And I wonder if we recognize that when we talk, right? It was anticipated that it marked the first time when the government of the Bahamas finally took the courage of its conviction to put public finances on a sustainable path. Our charge, Madam President, was ably led by the Honorable Peter Turnquest, former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, who went to the highways and the byways and to inform Bahamians and anyone who would listen about what we were seeking to accomplish. When speaking to the virtues of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2018, he's reported as saying the following in the Bahamas Investor dated 14th of January 2019. I am thinking of fiscal responsibility legislation in particular. The Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2018 is a great metaphor for the changes because it stands for a new era of transparency, accountability, inclusivity, stability, and forward planning. The governing principles it lays out call us to a higher standard as managers of the people's finances. The former minister noted that passing a new law does not automatically transform everything, but it sets the standard and obligates the shifting of the culture. The public should note, Madam President, also that the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, both provided guidance on the framework for the legislation. Here is what was said by the IDB in 2018, a 2018 policy brief by Alan Wright and Carrie Grenade, entitled Bahamas Fiscal Responsibility Bill 2018. It says this: the four objectives of the Bahamas proposed fiscal responsibility framework, FRF, are to establish the principles and procedures of responsible fiscal management, 2, to guide the formulation, implementation of fiscal objectives, and 3, guide the annual budget within a midterm fiscal framework, and 4, facilitate effective parliamentary and public scrutiny of the fiscal performance of government. Madam President, The fiscal legislation we put forward was intended to finally get our country on a path toward fiscal sustainability and to push back the growing debt. I heard someone in here say that the debt was less. I don't know that to be true. I don't know if the minister wishes to correct me on that, but I don't believe that to be so. Last I saw that the deficit was more than what we take in. The International Monetary Fund, in a country report number 19/198 entitled "The Bahamas 2019 Article 4 Consultation Press Release," staff report dated July 2019 on page 3, said the following: Directors welcome the decisive steps to consolidate the fiscal position and authorities' commitment to fiscal sustainability and macro-financial stability. They particularly welcome the enactment of the Fiscal Responsibility Law, noting its effective implementation would bolster policy credibility and ensure durable gains from fiscal consolidation. Directors encourage steps to further strengthen public financial management systems, tighten expenditure control, and operationalize the fiscal council plan. And so, end quote. And so let me tell you why Bahamians and others often wonder, Madam President, if the Bahamas is a real place. Here is a government that was voted into office, albeit by less than 35% of the registered voters, on this platform of transparency, accountability, and integrity, but waits for 18 months to pass before coming to Parliament to amend laws intended to require fiscal prudence and accountability in the expending of public funds. I'd have thought if this was such an urgent matter, we should have seen you here with this before now. I mean, 6 months at least. And then you say we didn't do anything, but we were fired, we were voted out of office. We were out of office, so we couldn't do anything with it. It was there for 6 months. It was there for 6 months before we voted out. You've been in 18 months, right? What's more astounding in my estimation is that they come with no explanation as to what they were doing in the past 18 months to comply with the laws that they ignored until now. So we don't know who got contracts and God knows what else during the period between the general elections and now. We don't know. You know, Madam President, instead of embracing these benchmark best standards, they determined to make excuses as to why the laws duly enacted and agreed by them in opposition, agreed, could not be followed. Could not be followed. The excuses they use for their refusal to follow laws that they voted for whilst in opposition are even more incredibly astounding to me. And on that point, if you simply voted for the legislation whilst in opposition merely for political expediency, I understand that. You should have made it among your top priorities to bring these amendments during the first 6 months, at least. You know, and then I heard someone arguing saying that no, they didn't deliberately break the laws. Then the speech from the throne said that you was going to break the law. The speech from the throne signaled you were not going to follow this law. I stood in here a couple of times and asked the Attorney General, when will you follow the law? You were the government's lawyer. Make them follow the law. And the response is what we see here today. We're going to make a new law. 18 months later, here we are. That would have been far more understandable than just ignoring the laws of the Bahamas as you did for these now 18 months. That would have resulted in a far better outcome than coming up with some of the puerile excuses that we've been forced to listen to during the course of these debates. Excuses, some of which are reported by Paige McCartney in the business section of the Nassau Guardian on the 16th of March, 2023. Like it's flawed and unworkable. These are the kind of excuses we're hearing from a duly elected government. Like there was a clear failure on the former administration's part to ensure that these two pieces of legislation, you heard some of that in here today, were practical and consistent with sound public policy. I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? That's a deep one I wish someone could explain to me. Like while the stated purpose of the legislation was to demonstrate the The former administration was reform-minded, so in its approach to managing the country's finances, the legislation itself was unworkable from the start. But, you know, I think my colleague made the point today that if this legislation was so unworkable, the entire thing should have been thrown out like you suggested. But you made a few amendments, and you bring it. So it could not have been entirely unworkable. Could not have been entirely unworkable. Madam President, all of the excuses given flew in the face of the rave reviews the law received from partner institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the IDB. Like, their legislation failed to meet the reality test. You know, Madam President, that's, I don't know. Let me move on. At first glance, even to the legally trained eye, and I know my colleague touched on this, but I have to touch on this as well. Even to the legally trained eye, if you look at Section 10 of the Public Finance Management Bill 2023, it appears odious to Article 136 of the Constitution. It appears to fly in the face of the constitutional powers given to the Auditor General by the Constitution of the Bahamas, and deserves an explanation which the Bahamian people might find reasonable. In the context of Article 136 of the Constitution, and we bear in mind, even this bill tells you, the Constitution is the supreme law of the Bahamas, as duly recognized by Section 3 in the same bill, right? Before us. It appears to me that, as might be noted in Section 10 of this bill, which addresses the role of the Auditor General, that there is an attempt to roll back the powers of the Auditor General. That's the way it appears to me. I stand corrected, you know. Madam President, any law which seeks to derogate from or limit or fetter the scope of the powers of the Auditor General reposed in his office or her office by Article 136 of the Constitution is abhorrent, is regressive, and authoritarian, and must not be supported. Cannot be supported. The Auditor General of the Bahamas must be free from direction or interference from the legislature or the executive. There must not even be the appearance of such interference. Article 136(3), which reads as follows, is instructive. And I quote, "The accounts of the Supreme Court, the Senate, the House of Assembly, all departments and offices of the government, but excluding the Department of the Auditor General, the Public Service Commission, the Judicial and Legal Service Commission, the Police Service Commission, and all magistrates' courts shall at least once in every year be audited and reported on by the Auditor General, who with his subordinate staff shall at all times be entitled to have access to all books, records, returns, and reports relating to such accounts." The Constitution takes the appointment of the Auditor General so serious that it equates him with the same security of tenure as it does magistrates, well, judges, Supreme Court jurists, 136. That ain't the right one you have there, 136. And so he can only be removed through legal proceedings. The framers of our Constitution wanted him to have such a view of independence that no one could willy-nilly. He's appointed by recommendation from the Public Service Commission to the Governor General, and he takes his post. He's not to be interfered with. Moreover, Madam President, paragraph 7 of the Article 136, the Constitution reinforces the point as follows. Nothing in this article shall prevent the performance by the Auditor General of such other functions in relation to the accounts of the government and the accounts of other public authorities and other bodies administering public funds in the Bahamas, as may be prescribed by or under any law, prescribed by or under any law, prescribed by or under any law, meaning this law too, right? For the time being enforced in the Bahamas, or B, such other functions in relation to the supervision and control of expenditure from public funds in the Bahamas as may be so prescribed. You know, it is my considered view that any business, any corporation, any entity, save and except those mentioned and the Auditor General can look into them too, as far as I'm concerned. Those mentioned in Schedule 8 of this Act. Anytime you get in public money, the Auditor General should have access to it. He should be able to see what you're doing. And you know, it's astounding to me that in this era that we live in, where we so tout transparency and accountability and integrity, that we are not doing more to lend to that position, that disposition that we take in this regard. Don't seek to claw back on powers. Seek to liberalize those powers. Liberalize those powers. It is our view on this side, excuse me, that we ought to be seeking to strengthen and increase the powers of the Auditor General, not to diminish them. That's our view. And you don't want to be accused as a government of trying to stop the Auditor General from doing his work. Now, my learned senior, the Honorable Sean McQueenie, who I have the utmost respect for, a constitutional scholar, extraordinaire, right? Bar none. If he hear what I'm saying and it's wrong, I'm sure he's going to correct me. The Constitution in Article 136(5) provides that in the exercise of its functions, the Auditor General shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person. None. No other person, you know, tells them what to look at when it comes to government funding. That's why this confuses me. The framers of our Constitution clearly attempt to give the Auditor General autonomy and independence from the legislature and the executive. But we don't like to let go power in this country, you know. And so I saw in this bill even where the Speaker of the House, who's an independent body, you know. The legislature is an independent body from the executive and the judiciary. We know that. There are three branches of government. They're independent. They should be allowed to operate as their own bodies. The other day we were here discussing how we're considering giving judges more autonomy or the head of the judiciary more autonomy to do his work. He should have just as much work as the Prime Minister has, just as much power almost as the Prime Minister has over the Cabinet when he exercises his role as head of the judiciary. Same thing with the Speaker of the House. We got into trouble for that last time. You know, the Speaker of the House should have, like the Auditor General, should have charge over our own budget. The Auditor General should have charge. If we really want to give this air of appearance that we're truly separate in powers, why does the Speaker of the House have to go to the Cabinet to get something? Why does the Auditor General have to go to his minister or the Cabinet to get something? Why? When they are, in law, separate and apart from all of these people.
Madam President.
Me too, but
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
Madam President, you know, I'm listening to Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield, and I'm standing on a point of order because I think, you know, we must understand that the public is listening. And so, you know, I hear the good senator going on about, you know, this stripping the bill, stripping powers from the Auditor General. And I just need some clarification for the public edification, why he's suggesting that, because I think my colleague read earlier where the Auditor General himself said that he does not view whatever is being stated in the bill as stripping away his powers. And so, please.
I want
Thank
to,
you, Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
I want to oblige you, and I'll do so.
Senator.
I'll do so for your edification. The Auditor General is an accountant by profession. I'm a lawyer, right? I'm trained in reading the law, so then we ought not be going over trite points. This is a very trite point because if you look at Section 10, no, just look at Section 10 if you will. This can take my time because if it does, I can just move on, right? Section 10, subsection 2, right?
You're responding to him?
Yes, ma'am.
So that should not take away.
Okay,
So, but
let's just do it this way then.
cut it a little short and write this.
I got to read the law. I mean, that's the bill that's before us, right? This here speaks to the role of the Auditor General in Section 10. It's on page 19. And I want to take you to subsection 2. We look at subsections 2 and 5 just for references, right? Subsection 1 shall not be construed as entitling the Auditor General to question the merits of the policy objectives of any department, authority, or body in respect of which an examination is carried out. The Auditor General never looks at policy, you know. What he looks at, and I think I have it somewhere in here, so forgive me if I repeat it. He looks at how government expenditure is disposed of based on policy. And he comes up with ways in which he can mitigate wastage or offer better suggestions to the government as to how they might spend those monies. So this to me is superfluous in the first instance. Because you don't have to tell the Auditor General, you don't have to look at policies, right? Now let's go to 5. Subject to subsection 6, no examination shall be carried out under this section by the Auditor General. This is what this law is saying. No examination shall be carried out by the Auditor General in respect to the government business enterprises, what we call GBEs, unless the carrying out of such an examination is included expressly or by implication in the functions exercisable by him under an agreement in subsection 6. So the Auditor General, if I'm reading this correctly, my learned senior, has to have an agreement from a minister before he can look into a government.
Correct.
To a government. No, the minister has to get it from the company, whoever that is, and then that's how it works. And so it's further explained at 6A and B, right? Let's just read 6 and then I'll move on. Subject to subsection 7, the responsible minister shall use his best endeavors to secure from a government business enterprise such rights as will enable examinations under this section to be carried out in respect. So the minister got to go and cajole this government enterprise, right? To say, you know, let him have a look. Let the Auditor General have a look. Making any sense to you? And this is what it's saying. An agreement was made by a responsible minister before the coming into force of this section, and the agreement does not expressly by implication allow such an examination. So all of the agreements we made before we make this a law, the minister got to go ask them now to say, let the Auditor General have a look. That's what this says to me. On B, a responsible minister makes an agreement after the coming into force of this section for the exercise of the Auditor General in respect of the relevant authority or body, any of the functions as are mentioned in paragraphs. That's self-explanatory, right? So after it comes in, he's still got to go and make sure the agreement is there for the Auditor General to have a look-see. That's the only point I'm making. And I call that regressive. I call that regressive. The framers of our Constitution clearly attempted to give the Auditor General autonomy and independence from the legislature and the executive by according the same terms of service as members of the judiciary and making the whole of that office irremovable except in accordance with judicial procedure. The only person who can remove him from that office is a court of law. The same thing with a judge. And so when Section 10 of the Public Finance Management Bill 2023, in particular subsections 2 and 5, assert that the Auditor General is constrained from the execution of his constitutional powers, and we went through that again. We went through that. Subsection 2 provides that subsection 1 shall not be construed as entitling the Auditor General to question the merits of a policy objective of any department, authority, or body in respect of which an examination is carried out. How can he not question the merit of how we spend government money? We should all know, however, I don't have much hair. I cut it off, so I don't concern myself with how they split. We should all know, however, that the Auditor General is not concerned with the merits of policy objectives, but with the expenditure of public finances used toward realizing such policy objectives. Subsection 5 provides that subject to subsection 6, no examination. So we did this already, right? Almost done. We don't want to give that appearance. You know. The Auditor General, in respect of government business enterprises, unless carrying out, of such an examination is included expressly or by implication in the functions exercisable by him under an agreement in subsection 6. This section appears to suggest that the Auditor General might be excluded by simply writing him out of an agreement made by the minister to do so. And I will welcome any explanation that tells me it's not so. But the public must understand. That's what we come here for. So the public can appreciate what we're trying to do here in the law, and we can get proper explanations for it. Subsection 6 in paragraphs A and B then goes on to explain respectively, as we've heard before, that if an agreement was made by the responsible minister before the coming into force of this section, and the agreement does not expressly or by implication allow such an examination, or a responsible minister makes an agreement after the coming into force of this section for the exercise by the Auditor General in respect of the relevant authority or body, any of the functions as are mentioned in paragraph C or subsection 3. This particular section seems to give a minister the power to exclude the Auditor General from looking into government expenditure before this act comes into force and after it comes into force. Can you imagine? A minister who has to get a government business to agree or enterprise to agree to permit the Auditor General to examine the use of public funds. Madam President, it is my considered view that any step taken to limit, impede, or reduce the independence of the office of the Auditor General is not acceptable. I fully appreciate government business enterprises and excluded entities listed in the 8th schedule in section 100. They are privately audited, and their audit statements should come before the Parliament. Now, I know in the past the Auditor General has had cause to look into some of these SOEs, or not SOEs, but GBEs, like BTVI, the NSA, and the NTA. The officer has had an opportunity to look into them at some point. But their private audits should be laid on the table in the House of Assembly, so all could have a look and see. Section 5 of the Financial Administration and Audit Act declares as much. It provides that the Auditor General may, in his discretion, at any time consult the auditors of any statutory corporation regarding its financial affairs, and if he is not satisfied with the result of such consultation, may report to the minister the nature of his dissatisfaction. So, as I take my seat, I thought it was very quick. As I take my seat, I only wanted to make that point, all right? So any effort to cut down any constitutional rights by way of legislation intended to exclude and stop the Auditor General from examining the use of public finances, and this does not mean this term to be used in law. It is abhorrent, and it cannot be supported. And as such, we will not support these amendments. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield. The chair recognizes the Senator the Honorable Ruben Rami. Sorry. That was a big cut. Okay. As many? Okay, as many. All right. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Alcides.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, for the wrap-up, I want to thank all senators for their contributions to these two very bills, and I would just like to take a few minutes. Madam President, thank you very much. And I want to thank all the senators for their contributions. And I just want to take a few moments in wrapping up, to address some of the issues raised during the course of the debate. I would like to say at the beginning, Madam President, that we are not getting rid of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Many of the provisions of that act are incorporated in the Public Financial Management Act that we would like to pass this afternoon. And And I would just like, as I said, to address a few points raised by honorable senators, and I thank them for their contribution. Senator Ellis, in her contribution, um, said that the bills were very long and it's an injustice to debate them together. But the intention is that since they deal with similar matters, and as has been the practice, we debate them as a compendium. Many of the provisions are similar, but notwithstanding the length of the combined legislation, I thank Senator Ellis for her obviously close study of the legislation and thus her contribution. I want to address the two issues mainly, well, three issues mainly, Madam President. The issue of the government willfully and knowingly, allegedly, willfully and knowingly breaking the law when as it relates, knowingly and deliberately. I thought it was willfully and knowingly and deliberately. I'm sorry, I'm not an attorney. Knowingly and deliberately breaking the law, specifically as it relates to Section 61 of the 2021 legislation that we're repealing, that calls for the publication of the beneficial ownership of contract awardees, people who are awarded contracts. And Senator Ellis went on to say that similar provisions for publication of the beneficial ownership are in the 2023 legislation. And I think she asked the question, how can the government be trusted to abide by Section 57 of the current legislation that calls for publication of beneficial ownership if we deliberately and knowingly, deliberately and knowingly. Someone told me I smile too much when I do this thing. What's the word? Deliberately and knowingly. Knowingly and deliberately. So the bottom line is, and it has been brought up extensively in that other place, that the current administration broke the law that by not publishing the beneficial ownerships as is required by Section 61 of the existing Act. I want to say, just to make a distinction between, firstly, we should not look at Section 61 of the Act in isolation when we say the government, this administration is not abiding by the legislation. Section 61 calls for, of the current Act calls for publication. But I would like to say that part of the difficulty, Madam President, is that in enacting the entire Act, there were extensive preparation provisions that needed to be made. And I'll read from a note, some notes I have, that speaks about the training and the application of the legislation. It's an extensive, and it was revolutionary. We were reminded that the Act, Public Procurement Act, was passed in March 2021. I think it came into force September 1st, 2021. And so the former administration did not have the opportunity to govern under the Act. And we also remember that we were in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we had a lot of those provisions suspended, emergency orders. And so what had to happen, Madam President, is, for example, we had to engage staff, the Chief Public Procurement Officer, and there had to be extensive training in all departments. So permit me, Madam President, just to take a few minutes to read some of the training that has gone on in terms of implementation of the Public Procurement Act. And the point I just wish to make is that there are sometimes legislation that are beneficial, laudable, they're revolutionary, they're new, but in terms of implementing them, certain infrastructure is required. We think of the information, the Freedom of Information Act, that is ongoing in its implementation. The commissioner has been appointed, he's doing training, he's being resourced. It's fully not implemented, it's being implemented. And I think we should take a similar view as to the Public Procurement Act, understanding that there is certain infrastructure that has to be put in place for it to be effective, and that it is not a deliberate and knowing repudiation of the law, Madam President. And so training and application of the Public Procurement Act is an ongoing assignment. Just recently, the procurement team held a workshop with all technical staff from the Ministry of Works to provide clarity on numerous queries with respect to gaining a better understanding of the procurement methodologies, i.e. limited, selective, restrictive bidding, and request for proposals. From the perspective of the staff from the Ministry of Works, there was a view that the current Act was not clear on the application of these methodologies, hence a level of trepidation existed. In addition to staging workshops to explain sections of the current Procurement Act, the focal instrument arising from the Act is the e-procurement portal. And it goes on to say that in addition to the training of the staff at the Ministry of Works, training is now planned for Ministry of Education, Ministry of Public Health, Ministry of National Security, Royal Bahamas Police Force, Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Department of Local Government, and the Customs Department. Furthermore, Madam President, there is a schedule, and as a matter of fact, there was online training on Thursday, 16th, and Friday, the 17th of March for the Department of Immigration, Office of the Auditor General, Department of Transformation and Digitization, Labor and Immigration, Education, Ministry for Grand Bahama Customs, Judiciary, Youth, Sports and Culture, Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, National Security, PHA, Ministry of Works again. On the 20th of March, National Insurance Board, Ministry of Health and Wellness, Ministry of Public Works, Ministry of Agriculture, Department of Transformation. And then for the week of the 30th, Governor General, Correctional Services, Parliamentary Registration Department, Lands and Surveys, the BDF, National Security, Education, Foreign Affairs. So because the law encompasses the totality of government, Madam President, there's a tremendous amount of training. So there was not a deliberate and knowing repudiation of the law, Madam President, but it is an understanding, from our point of view, that you need to holistically apply the law. The second point I want to make from that respect, Madam President, is in the new legislation, the 2023 Act, when we go to the provisions of Section 57 and 58 that deals with the publication of awardees, it says Section 57 is titled Contract Award Notice. And it talks about, in this act, it says the procuring entity shall publish within 60 days of the award of the procurement contract for goods a notice of the award of the procurement contract. So it will publish the award and will give the title of the bid, the name of the entity, the government entity that's procuring, description of the scope, selection method, etc. And then it makes provisions for any address required to be published pursuant to this section, which is a private or residential address, shall be redacted prior to publishing. I think that deals with the safety of individuals, so your personal address. So the provision for the publication of the names is in the new act, Madam President. But I think what is something that we should be aware of is that, again, this new act, 2023, goes on in the next section, section 58, to say, section 58.3, to say, and I'll read it, notwithstanding any other laws, any successful bidder and each beneficial owner of a successful bidder shall be deemed to have consented to the publication of the name of such beneficial owner when accepting the procurement contract. So when you accept it, by accepting it, you agree to have your name published. Why is this important? This is important, Madam President, because, another reason for hesitation of publication of, beneficial ownership, if we reflect, no reverse back. You reflect back, right? Because you don't reflect forward. you reflect, Madam President, you'll recall, and I'll be quick. You know, the hour's getting late. Back in June of 2020, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government of Bahamas accessed $250 million from the IMF under a rapid response facility made available to countries in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Part of the conditions of accessing that facility was you have to publish the beneficial ownership of companies who get contracts using that money. That's what we agreed to, Governor of Bahamas agreed to before you got the money, right? After we got the money, there was a report by the Auditor General, and I'll read an article from the online, and I'll table it, Online Guardian, speaking about that issue. And in summary, what the Attorney General at the time said was that there was no law that enabled you to publish beneficial ownership, and that he would have to come back and amend the Beneficial Ownership Act to enable you to amend to publish the act, right? So let me publish the name. All right. So let me just read it. I'll read it, and then maybe there'll be some edification, and I'll complete this point. Then I'll address the Auditor General issue, and then the disabled issue, and I'll be done. If I may, Madam President, as I read from the article. This is dated August 12, 2021. It's an online version of the Nassau Guardian. It's entitled, AG says beneficial ownership law should be amended to include Ministry of Finance. Attorney General Carl Bethel said yesterday that the solution to the inability of the Ministry of Finance to disclose the beneficial ownership of entities receiving procurement contracts under the IMF loan facility is to amend the current law. Bethel was referring to comments made by Auditor General Terence Bastian in a recent audit report that the government did not provide the names of the beneficial owners of the companies that were paid more than $63 million from the IMF, from International Monetary Fund IMF, $250 million rapid financing instrument to address COVID-19 pandemic. Quote, quoting the AG, this matter and the background discussions which led to this apparent impasse has only today been brought to my attention. In other words, I, as the minister responsible, and the Attorney General was not involved in the giving of any advice on this matter. It was the senior staff involved with other technical officers in the Ministry of Finance, Bethel said in the upper chamber yesterday. The issue is quite simple, and now that I have been made aware of the matter, it is now very easy to solve. Bastian, in the audit report on the IMF disbursement of $250 million to address the COVID-19 pandemic, pointed to a Ministry of Finance legal unit summary of the matter of beneficial ownership disclosure, which stated that under the existing legislation, authorization does not exist for any authority for the disclosure, publication of beneficial ownership information in relation to the tender process, especially if no prior consent to disclosure is given. And so we're correcting that in this legislation, we're having prior consent. Referring to the Registrar General, to the Register of Beneficial Ownership, Act 2019-2020, Bethel said that the Bahamas has yet to join the rest of the world in establishing a public registry of beneficial ownership. Just, quote, just a little background. We established the beneficial ownership secure search system to address global concerns that there must be greater transparency in access to the information as to who owns corporate and other vehicles which are active in the global financial system. This is a global initiative, and every country is being encouraged, quote, encouraged to implement systems designed to prevent the hiding of beneficial ownership information. We do not have a public registry of beneficial ownership, unlike Great Britain and other European countries. Our Registrar of Beneficial Ownership Act was modeled on the industry standards set throughout the world. It provides for a secure system of registration of beneficial ownership information for all entities specified in the law, which registry is only accessible for law enforcement and regulatory purposes. By Section 13.1 of the Register of Beneficial Ownership, very stringent confidentiality terms are imposed by the law. Further, in Section 13.2, the law states that all information maintained on each database is confidential, etc. And then it says Section 12.6 of the Act lists the authorities which may designate an officer to request and receive search report on the Beneficial Ownership Register, which is the AG, the FIU, the Central Bank, the Compliance Commission, Securities Commission, and Securities Commission, and Insurance Commission, not the Ministry of Finance. The solution is very simple. We simply need to amend the Act to add the Ministry of Finance. That was in August 12, 2021, and the House was dissolved 7 days later, Madam President, so obviously the Act was not amended. Bastian said the Office of the Auditor General recommended that consideration be given to addressing the beneficial ownership disclosure in terms of advancing and strengthening good governance, harnessing accountability in public sector procurement and financial affairs, further strengthen good governance of all legal entities doing business in the country, and further advance compliance in the regulatory, maintain good ethics for safety and protection. So, Madam President, what we see is in the new legislation, the specific requirement that when a person receives a contract, they are giving consent for their name to be published. And so, you know, the matter of publishing the information prior, without having that consent beforehand, Madam President, was questionable and is being cleared up in this Act. Because if we look at the existing Act, section 61 of the existing Act, it says section of the existing Act, Madam President, it simply says you should publish without any consent. I think out of the abundance of caution, now we're amending this Act where the individual who gets the contract is giving the consent for his information to be published, and so we deal with this issue that the former Attorney General spoke about, meaning saying there was really no legal provision to publish information without prior consent of the individuals. This Act fixes this, we believe, Madam President. Madam President, secondly, I want to say, to address the issue of the Auditor General, because the Honorable Senator Enfield addressed it extensively, and as well I think it was raised by the Senator Ellis and Senator Seymour. I want to say, Madam President, that in our view, when we speak to, of course, the Auditor General's powers are set out in the Constitution, and I just refer to it, Section 136, as said by Senator Henfield and Senator Ellis, where it says, use a paper copy? Yeah, I have it here, but in a block. It says, and I think it's quite of course we agree that there should be no diminution of the powers of the Auditor General. We do not think that this Act does it, and I'll give you why we believe that is the case. Because in the Constitution, Section 136, it says, Section 136, subsection 1 says there shall be an Auditor General, and subsection 3 of Section 136 goes on to say the accounts of, I'm reading, the accounts of the Supreme Court, the Senate, the House of Assembly, all departments and offices of the government, but excluding the Department of Auditor General, the Public Service Commission, the Judicial and Legal Service Commission, the Police Service Commission, and all magistrates' courts shall at least once in every year be audited and reported on by the Auditor General, who with his subordinate staff shall at all times be entitled to access to the books relating to such accounts. And I think, and then on to subsection 5, in the exercise of his functions, the Auditor General shall not be subject to the direction of control of any person or authority, and we agree with the independence of the Auditor General. I think when we come to this Act and we go to Section 10 of the Public Financial Management Act, Madam President, where I think two things are happening here. Firstly, I understood the Honorable Senator Henfield to say that no, the Auditor General does not opine on policy objectives. I think that's what I understand. Right. He does not. And he should, and he ought not. And I think this act is just reinforcing that because policy objectives are set by the politicians, by the policymakers. Now, it might be superfluous, but so that particular, my point is that when we look at Section 10, subsection 2 of the act that we're debating now, when we say that he shall not question the merits of the policy objectives, it might be superfluous, but I think it's not, that in itself, that section does not take away any, perhaps it might be considered a goes without saying. So everybody knows he doesn't question the merits of the policy objectives. The policy objectives are set by the policymakers. The Auditor General is concerned with the collection, disbursement, accounting for public funds. Why I say I don't think when the Act speaks about the government business enterprises, and they are listed, I think Senator Enfield read them. Yes, several Schedule 8, which is our Port Department, Bahamas Development Bank, Bahamas Maritime Authority, Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, Bahamas Power and Light, Bahamas Resolve, Bahamas Air, Bank of the Bahamas, Bridge Authority, Broadcasting Corporation, Holdco, Kind Renewal Holdings Limited, Nassau Development, Nassau Cruise Port, Nassau Flight Services, National Art Gallery, Poinciana SRV, Tourism Development Corporation, Water and Sewage Corporation. Some are government agencies, some are special purpose vehicles. I believe that, that the legislation requiring there to be an agreement to audit all of these is just because the Constitution is so specific in terms of listing the entities that the Auditor General must audit and does not specifically include these. We need a mechanism whereby the Auditor General can capture all of those other things which are not explicitly stated here. That's I think that was the intention of the framers, and perhaps we need to look at it to make it lucidly clear that I agree that the Auditor General should not be, those things when you're talking about public funds being expended, that should come within the purview of the Auditor General. But as I said, my view is I think the framers were looking at, when you're talking about the Constitution and it lists something, and then you're talking about, it lists these things, and someone might interpret it as, okay, the Constitution say this, and if it's not included in this, it's not included in this as an attempt to capture that in the legislation. I believe that's what it is, but of course we can look at it because our view is the Auditor General should have the role to audit and to be able to make sure that public funds, wherever they are, in whatever form, are accounted for. So I think that is the intention, but the point is taken. Madam President, the timing of the fiscal strategy report is another matter that came up, and I'll address it quickly. And this is our view, because the point was raised by Senator Ellis that what's the point of debating the fiscal strategy report at the same time as the budget if the fiscal strategy report is supposed to inform the budget. The view proffered by the technical staff is that if you have a fiscal strategy report that's due in November, that means you have to start working on it in October, September, using information that's available in August. And so you're using information to prepare a report to inform something that starts again July 1st, so the information might be a year old. That's their view. The whole issue of, and there's another view, in that in terms of parliamentary time, Madam President, of course, public finances and accounting for public finances is the most important issue. I mentioned it as I was moving the bills. The most important issue. And I think that there is a view that we need to be able to use parliamentary time to, to not be totally consumed with financial issues, but to be able to have some more issues and streamline it as well. And so we'll try this and and see how it works. Yeah, on adjournment. Um, so I think that's what it is, Madam President. And in general, in principles, from a high level, of course, we support all the principles of fiscal transparency. Sometimes there's a there's a tendency of the IMF and the IDB and the World Bank and those to use what we used to call those cookie cutter approaches, those textbook approaches. Yes, fiscal responsibility, integrity, transparency, good governance, all laudable um, goals. Let's tailor make it for our purposes. Not watering down, but let's do it so we can use it. And we evolve to some of these things as well, Madam President. The other point was made about interference and independence of the Fiscal Responsibility Council. I don't think that was the intention, and so we have to, demonstrate that they are truly independent. I would say that in the legislation it says that the Governor General appoints, and I know from my experience so far that if the Governor General appoints, the Governor General has to disappoint. And if he appoints, you just don't go to the Governor General and say, take stock off, because I don't like how he look at me during lunchtime. No. So I think that is the protection. The Governor General appoints someone in order, you say, I believe this person is fit and proper. In order for him to disappoint, or she, you must be able to say, give some reasoning. So I think that was not the intention. And finally, the final point I want to make, Madam President, is, and I think I've covered all of the points, I believe, is that the point made by Senator Seymour to include disabled individuals in the development preference list. I'd say, Senator Seymour, if we could do it here, we would do it, but it is supported. There's no objection whatsoever to that, and so we will make that representation that we amend that section so that we have micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, women-owned business, family-owned, youth-owned business, and businesses owned by disabled. That is something, obviously, an oversight, and obviously a counter-argument to the argument that we appear rubber stamping, because we can receive good suggestions and take it on and forward it up the line to make sure that we can come back and make that. And so we have no objection to that, and I will be recommending that. And so, Madam President, thank you very much. Madam President, I hope that allays some of the concerns raised. And I want to say that we continue to encourage input and feedback from the NGOs and those public-minded citizens who use the colloquial term, who chime in or who contribute and who give input and feedback to what we're doing and what we're proposing. And we continue to promote that. We don't always agree, and we don't always take on the suggestions. Some people might suggest that, some of the NGOs are more active at certain times, but we take on the suggestions, and we listen, but not because all suggestions are not taken on does not mean that we dismiss. And so again, we encourage public-minded individuals to continue to keep our feet to the fire, because we're not infallible, and we're here to serve the Bahamian people. We believe that what we're doing here today will promote transparency and good governance. If we see problems, if it does not, we come back and we make the changes where necessary. So once again, Madam President, thank you to all of the senators who have contributed. And so I will just formally now move for the second reading and committal of the Public Procurement Bill 2022, a bill for an act to repeal and replace Public Procurement Act, revise the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to further promote fair and equitable treatment of all suppliers, consultants, and contractors, and to further promote competition, transparency, sustainability, and integrity in public procurement and for connected matters.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Public Procurement Act, to revise the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to further promote fair and equitable treatment of all suppliers, consultants, and contractors, to further promote competition, transparency, sustainability, and integrity in public procurement and for connected matters. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Public Procurement Act, to revise the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to further promote fair and equitable treatment of all suppliers, consultants, and contractors, to further promote competition, transparency, sustainability, and integrity in public procurement and for connected matters.
For the second reading,
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I move for second reading and committal of a bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the consolidated fund, for the authorization of expenditures, for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money, for internal audit, for the management of government property, and for the preparation of the financial statements and reports on public finances and the accountability of public entities and government business enterprises, collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to provide for matters connected therewith and incidental thereto.
Second.
it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the consolidated fund, for the authorization of expenditures, for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money, for internal audit, for the management of government property, for the preparation of financial statements and reports of public finances, for the accountability of public entities and government business enterprises, collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to amend for matters connected therewith and incidental thereto. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the consolidated fund, for the authorization of expenditure, for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money, for internal audit, for the management of government property, for the preparation of the financial statements and reports on public finances, for the accountability of public entities and the government business enterprises, collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
Committee of the Whole, Senate.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do resolve itself into a committee of the whole with the Vice President in the chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole in the chair. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried.
Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chairman, in respect to the bill for an act to repeal and replace the Public Procurement Act, to revise the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to further promote fair and equitable treatment of all suppliers, consultants, and contractors, to further promote competition, transparency, sustainability, and integrity in public procurement and for connected matters. I move that the long title be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye. Aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
Is there a
Second.
seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye. Aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that sections 2 to 80 be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that sections 2 through 80 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
There's
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The motion is carried. Clauses 2 through 80 of the bill are agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the first schedule, the second schedule, and the third schedule be agreed.
second.
It has been moved and seconded that the first, second, and third schedules of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye. Aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The motion is carried. Schedules 1, 2, and 3 of the bill are agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we now, in respect to the bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the consolidated fund, for the authorization of expenditures, for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money, for internal audit, for the management of government property, for the preparation of financial statements and reports on public finances, for the accountability of public entities and government business enterprises, collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to provide for matters connected therewith and incidental thereto. I move that the long title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam, Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title be agreed. As many are in favor say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that sections 2 to 152 be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that sections 2 through 152 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The motion is carried. Sections 2 through 152 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th schedules be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that schedules 1, that the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th schedules of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The motion is carried. Schedules 1 through 16 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor say aye. Aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the President do now take the chair.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the President do now take the chair. As many are in favor say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is carried. Madam President will now take the chair. Madam President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has examined both bills, having made no amendments to either.
Honorable Senators, the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined the bill, having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Madam President, I move for a third reading and passing of a bill for an act to repeal and replace the Public Procurement Act, to revise the framework and procedures for the public procurement of goods, works, and services, to further promote fair and equitable treatment of all suppliers, consultants, and contractors, to further promote competition, transparency, sustainability, and integrity in public procurement, and for connected matters.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and pass. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed. Order. Order that this bill do now pass, and the title thereof declared to be Public Procurement Act 2023. Further third reading of bills.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to provide for the control and management of public finance, for the operation of the Consolidated Fund, for the authorization of expenditures, for the administration of special funds, for the investment of public money, for internal audit, for the management of government property, for the preparation of the financial statements and reports on public finances, and for the accountability of public entities and government business enterprises, collection of revenue, and for transitional matters and consequential amendments, and to provide for matters connected therewith and incidental thereto.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed. Ordered that this bill do now pass, and the title thereof declared to be the Public Finance Management Act 2023. Further third reading of bills.
There are none, Madam President.
Consideration of House amendments. Resolutions. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings.
Madam President, I would like to renew all notices in the name of the government.
Adjournment.
Madam President, I move that the Senate on its rising do adjourn sine die.
Second.
It has been moved and second that the Senate, at its rising, do adjourn sine die. As many as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The Senate stands adjourned sine die. Final adjournment. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield.
Madam President, you know, I dare not speak until I'm recognized, right?
Very good.
I just wanted to, we neglected to do it at the beginning of the debate, as was done in the other place. I wanted to, on behalf of our side, thank the Financial Secretary and his team for a caucus meeting held with us in the opposition, which walked us through all of these legislation that we debated today. We don't want that to go unnoted. It was very kind of them to do so, and very instructive and minister through you. I thank you.
Final adjournment.
Before I move the final adjournment, I would just like to congratulate Senator Seymour. I was looking through the paper today, and I see Senator Seymour prominently featured in an organization called CHAMPS, Chosen, Honored, Appointed, Motivated, Positive Sisters, which is an organization designed for young adults and the mature women who are ready to be intentional about maximizing their potential for a good cause, and it speaks about the objectives relating to young and not so young women and enabling them to fulfill their potential. In today's paper, it's a wonderful read, and congratulations, Senator Seymour. There's a seminar coming up on March 31st at the Church of God of Prophecy Love Center, so all are invited. Madam President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn. And many as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed. The Senate stands adjourned.